The room glowed honey gold. Glass chimed in miniature bells. Heat from the kitchen drifted through Aurelia's dining room like a secret steeped in rosemary and butter. The air salted with the ocean that lay 2 miles away, and with the money that had drifted farther, settling here in tailored suits and lacquered nails. Nova Ellis kept her hands in her lap. She counted breaths against the thin chain at her throat. The silver locket lay cool on her sternum, its clasp a quiet hinge that sometimes clicked when her heart kicked too hard. A tiny sound her mother used to joke was proof. You're built like a door made for opening. Around here, conversations ran smooth. The lighting made everyone younger. A quartet on a low riser stitched standards into silk, and the tables floated on those notes, the way boats float on a bay anchored, but never still when the maitre d' paused at Nova's elbow, and the blonde woman from 2 tables over rose like a storm starting on the horizon. "Excuse me." A smile without warmth. Portia Harrow carried her husband's surname like a passkey, and her own as a brand. The diamonds at her ears were stars caught in place. The white dress sculpted to a body that had paid for its symmetry and could afford the maintenance. Nova didn't stand. She had learned not to. Standing gave ground in places like this, and Damon had just stepped toward the glass doors to take a call from Tokyo. 2 fingers raised in apology. The shape of his absence sitting across from her like a second chair. "I think there's a mistake." Portia's perfume had winter in it. Something icy and medicinal slid into Nova's nose, the way a hospital smell finds you in the lobby and won't leave. And the older man at the window, brown hands folded on his napkin, eyes soft but alert, looked over, as if he'd heard that tone before, in another life. "No mistake," Nova said. She kept her voice low. Her reflection in the turned silver spoon showed a steady mouth and eyes that had dealt with office parents, foster parents, and boardroom parents, and she held the spoon long enough to feel the cool metal pick up the heat of her fingers. Portia tilted her heel. The move was practiced. "That table is reserved," she said, letting the sentence travel on her breath to nearby ears, as if words could be placed on other people's plates, like amuse-bouches. A laugh fluttered somewhere, nervous and eager to belong to someone stronger. "This is my table." Nova set the spoon down. "Our reservation is under Cade," she said, and she saw Portia hear it, the name that greased doors, and saw her dismiss it just as fast. Because a navy dress with quiet seams did not look like what wealth should look like when it sat alone with water and no wine. "Sweetheart," Portia said, a soft slap of condescension. "There are places where one can try on fantasies, and there are places where we maintain standards," she murmured, angling her body so her profile and her judgment faced the room. The quartet drifted into a bridge, and the bass player's finger squeaked on a string like a hinge begging oil. Nova's locket ticked. She felt the minute click. It was so small she might have imagined it, but the sound was there, the way a crack is there inside glass, even before light finds it. And she folded her hands tighter until her knuckles pressed crescents into her palm. "My husband will be back." She kept her shoulders square. "He stepped out to take a call," Nova said, and at the bar, a bartender slowed his polishing without looking up. And the older man by the window, Mr. Duarte, she would learn later, shifted his napkin, as if placing it for future reference. Portia laughed once. It was brittle and thin. "Of course he did," she said, and the words picked up speed, sharper now, cutting to reach further. "And of course you're comfortable here in Target, couture at a table. People wait weeks to touch. Do you know where you are?" "Dear." Nova said nothing. Silence can be body armor. She let the quiet carry the room instead. felt its weight settle on her collarbone, and with it the old, stubborn thing that had survived. Detroit winters and community center summers and budgets that didn't count her softness as a line item. Portia's finger rose, it hovered, then pointed. "I will not be insulted by some classless nobody," she said clearly enough to be captured wholesale by a dozen phones that had risen like lilies from a pond. And a table near the kitchen's pass saw the swing before Nova did, a blur of pale and diamond and decision. The slap crack sound fell out of it. It rang off crystal and tile and the brass rail of the bar, a hard report that bent time around it, and the quartet stopped on the same breath. The violinist's bow suspended like a question over the strings. Nova's cheek burned. Her eyes didn't. She felt the heat flower and hold a bloom that made the locket cold by comparison, and the chain tugged the tiniest hair at the back of her neck. So she knew her body in 3 separate points: sting, chill, pull, and the map of her steadiness anchored there. A chair scraped. Damon's voice cut through. "What did you just do?" he asked, not loud and not quiet, and that was somehow worse, because the question had weight and aim, and Portia turned with relief, already forming, like a swimmer spotting a lifeguard who would pull her back to the right side of the rope. Finally, Portia said, "She chose the wrong shore. Would you kindly remove this woman from a table? She's appropriated. Your staff really should vet better." "She's my wife." Damon didn't blink. The sentence landed with a clean thud that flattened the room, and Nova watched Portia's certainty drain like a bad tan under cold light, leaving the raw skin of a person who had misread the script and now faced the audience without her lines. The manager arrived. His tie was too tight. "Mr. Cade," he said, throat working. "Ma'am, please, perhaps we can step into my office," and his eyes flicked to the cameras at the ceiling corners, those little black sockets that recorded memory without understanding it, and then to Portia's hand, still half raised like a confession. Damon didn't move. He didn't touch Nova yet. "Your office can wait," he said. "Your security can't." And he turned to the bar, to the staff, to the room that now felt like a courtroom built of brass and linen. "No one leaves, no one deletes, and no one edits. You will preserve every feed and every table log, starting now." A single fork chimed. It sounded like a bell. Mr. Duarte cleared his throat as if he had been called to the stand, and raised an old phone with a cracked blue case, hand steady as someone who had done steadiness for a living, his napkin half folded beside the plate like a page dog-eared without guilt. "I saw everything." His voice was even. He didn't look at Portia when he said it, and didn't look at Nova either. He looked at the manager because he knew the order of things, the sequence by which truth fits into forms, and the manager nodded, like a pen being placed on paper. Portia found breath. She rebuilt it the expensive way. "This is out of proportion," she said, smoother now. There was a misunderstanding. She was confrontational. And the word she stuck with was one that looked good on a certain kind of complaint. The kind that drifted to the top of stacks when the names on the tabs were heavy. Nova touched her cheek. Her fingers came away dry. The shock didn't bring tears. It brought a stillness like snow when the world hisses to silence for a second, and every sound after feels like a transgression. And she finally looked directly at Portia and saw not money, not fame, not even malice, just appetite. "Write it down," Damon said. He spoke to the manager. "Time, witnesses, positions, any contact between staff and this guest prior to the incident," he said. And then he angled his face toward Nova, and the edge of anger in him softened, his hand hovering over her shoulder like light tries a surface before it decides to land. Phones lowered. They didn't go away. They hovered at chest height now, screens glowing like strange flowers. And outside on Cannon the traffic hummed, the slow, patient sound of money rolling over money, and somewhere in the kitchen a ticket printer stuttered "Chi, chi, chi, chi," spitting proof of orders that appeared as if from nowhere. Portia adjusted her bracelet. The diamonds still caught. "Let's be reasonable," she said, looking at Damon, the way people look at locks. They think they can pick. At systems they think they can game with the right tone and the right donation. Her smile flexed. Calculated, close to holding. Reasonable starts with names. Damon's eyes stayed cold. Yours, the servers, the host on duty, and whoever seats VIPs outside the book, he said, and the manager began to speak and stop, because the words he needed lived in a binder, in a back office, and also in a waiter's head, and also nowhere safe. Nova breathed in. The locket clicked again. It was louder now, or maybe she was inside. She felt the tiny mechanism articulate like a knuckle, cracking. And in the click was her mother's kitchen, and a metal door that stuck in winter, and the way the world only opens when you lean on it with the exact right pressure. "I won't be moved," Nova said. She kept her palms open. Her voice was not brave and not small. It was ordinary in a way that made people stand up straighter, and the bartender with the polished glass put it down clean, then reached under the bar and set a thick, bound logbook on the surface like an oath. Silence settled. It had weight and edges. You could feel where it ended at the dish pit door with the smell of lemon and hot water, at the sliding glass, where the patio heaters ticked, at the doorway, where a valet leaned in because he could feel the change in weather without stepping outside. In that silence, Portia folded, not from conscience, from calculus. Her shoulders shifted 1/2 inch toward retreat, and you could see the equation finish itself on her face, variables rearranging around a result she didn't like. And for a second, she looked gray and human, like anyone who has misjudged the tide and found water at their waist. "We'll sort this," she said. It was an exit line. She aimed it at the room, not at Nova, and she turned and moved, the white dress seaming itself into the crowd, the perfume dispersing, a bank of phones tracking her path, the way gulls track a boat pulling away from shore, confident the wake will deliver something worth pecking. The manager exhaled. He gestured to a corridor. "Please," he said, to Nova now and to Damon. "My office." And Damon finally rested his hand where it had hovered, warm on Nova's shoulder, and she let herself lean a fraction, just enough for the hinge to hold, just enough for the door inside her to stay on its pin. They walked, carpet muffled their steps, past the bar where the logbook lay open to a page that would become a timestamp, past Mr. Duarte, who nodded once like a man signing his name, past the quartet, who began again, softer, because even music knows when it should lower its eyes. At the office threshold, Nova paused. Light hummed, sterile and white. On the wall, a camera's red dot blinked steady as a heartbeat, and in that dot, she saw the most ordinary miracle: how the truth isn't a flourish, or a grand speech, or a finish. It's a record kept, a page saved, a hinge intact. The locket cooled. She touched it once, and as the door clicked, shut behind them with a sound like a precise, final note, Nova Ellis took one more breath and held it the way you hold a line tight, clean, ready to pull. The office smelled like toner and citrus cleaner. Fluorescence hummed a single note. A wall of clipboards stared back with the blank authority of forms waiting to be obeyed, and a small camera in the corner blinked its steady red pulse, as if taking the room's pulse and finding it high. Rovan Pike, the general manager, shut the door with 2 careful fingers. His tie had a wrinkle at the knot. "You can sit," he said, voice pitched to soothe, and he gestured to two leather chairs that creaked like old knees when Nova and Damon lowered into them, the sound oddly intimate in the narrow space. Nova's locket clicked, a tiny metal syllable. She kept her palms flat on her skirt, tracing a seam with one thumb until the thread's texture steadied her breath, and listened to the air vent, rinse cool air, over the top of her head in a patient, indifferent stream. "We need to start a record." Damon's tone was procedural. "Time stamps, names, camera locations. You'll secure footage now. Mirror it to external storage. Then email a checksum of the copied files to your own counsel and to mine," he said. And the way he said checksum made Rowan blink like a man who'd just been asked to swear in a language he could read, but rarely spoke aloud. Rowan nodded. He reached for a binder. "Aurelia maintains 30 days of video on a local NVR," he said, voice slipping into policy like a shoe back into its mold. "Cameras in the dining room, bar, host stand, exits, and the corridor outside this office. Audio at the bar only," he added, a reflexive confession. "Don't power anything down." Damon kept his hands visible. "And call your IT vendor to remote in and lock write access to last 4 hours. If a single byte goes missing, it becomes the story," he said. Then, softer, to Nova, "Are you dizzy?" "I'm fine." Her cheek buzzed where heat met cool. She watched Rowan punch an outside line on the desk phone, heard the low ring cut by a cheerful voice, and listened to him say phrases that felt like lifelines. "Legal hold. Preserve." "No" overwrites his eyes, cutting once to the camera's red light, as if checking it was still on their side. A knock. The door opened on a wedge. Grace, the hostess with the neat bun and the small, worried mouth, stood in the crack holding a black notebook and a handful of chits, the paper edges fanning like a deck. She didn't enter until Rowan waved her through. "Seat maps. Tonight." She laid the pages down square. "Comps. VIP list. Printed at 712. Updated 846, she said. And Nova liked the way Grace named time, like a person who understood how memory hardens when stamped and how it's always the seconds you can't account for that. "Loosen everything." Damon flipped the map. 2 columns of names hummed. Table N 14 Cade. Table N 12 Harrow. Grace's initials marked the reservation notes with a small, even G, and a smudge of printer ink stained the corner where someone had caught the page too soon. Rowan's phone buzzed. He glanced, then let it vibrate out. A name flashed and vanished. P. Harrow, and the wrinkle at his tie deepened, a small tell on a man navigating 2 currents at once. "Guest services will want a statement," he said. His fingers tapped the desk. "And our PR firm will advise on language. I want to be clear, we don't condone. Don't write unfortunate incident. Ender." Damon didn't look up. "And don't write misunderstanding," he added, gentler but not less firm. "Say what happened. Commit to the investigation. And tell your staff to keep their phones on airplane mode until the police collect copies. Chain of custody matters more than a cute caption." Grace shifted. Her nails were short, unpainted. "Should I print the server's shift notes?" she asked, eyes sliding to Nova for half a second with something like apology. And when Rowan nodded, she slipped back into the hall, leaving behind a crisp scent of laundry, starch, and mint gum. The room tightened. Silence gathered in the corners. Nova felt her heartbeat climb a notch toward her throat, and then settle again as the vent hatch ticked with thermal expansion. A little metal sound that answered her locket like distant cousins, recognizing each other in a crowd. The door knocked again. Mr. Duarte stepped in like a man entering a clinic. "Forgive me," he said, hat in hand that he hadn't been wearing, a habit older than the city. "The officer at the front asked me to wait, but I wanted to give you this." He set his old phone on the desk, a cable already coiled around it. "I recorded from when the lady stood up. Timestamps on." Rowan swallowed. "Thank you, Seer." He slid the phone near his keyboard, as if accepting a vial for analysis, and Damon offered a business card, a small rectangle, with a number scrawled beneath the print. Duarte squinted at the name. "Don't need counsel," he said. "I have a conscience," he added, dry as a salted rim, and Nova's mouth twitched before she could stop it. She met Duarte's eyes. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, eyes flicking once to her cheek, the look brief and technical, like a triage nurse noting a bruise he'd later be asked to describe. Footsteps clustered outside. Two officers entered with the blue of the uniforms turning the white room cooler. The younger one took a breath and squared his shoulders like a man who preps before he approaches a ledge. The older one let the door fall softly shut and took in the camera, the desk, the people. "Evening," the older officer said. His name tag read K. Blanco. "We've got complaints and we've got witnesses. We're going to take statements, collect any recordings, and ask if medical is needed." He watched Nova like he was checking pupils. "Ma'am, I'm okay," Nova said. "My cheek stings." She kept it clinical, grateful for the way names and numbers can sometimes carry you over the messy part of feeling, and Blanco nodded, as if she'd passed a test he hadn't wanted to give. The younger officer opened an evidence bag. It crackled like fresh ice. "Phone, please," he said to Rowan. "We'll mirror on a right blocker. You'll keep the device," and the phrase, "right blocker," relaxed something in Damon's shoulders that hadn't relaxed since the kitchen heat hit the room. Blanco wrote with a slow pen. He took Damon first. "Name, relationship, time. Describe the sound," he asked. Eyes on the page, and Damon said, "Sharp. One strike. Open hand." And Nova felt the words land in the air like pins on a map, mapping hurt to evidence. Grace returned with a slim stack. "Server's notes," she said. "And the pre-shift briefing." Rowan slid the briefing to Blanco, who read the first line: "VIP Harrow Party. Seating priority, N12, and the third reminder, zero contact policy for harassment. Escalate to manager immediately." And his mouth went flat, not angry, not surprised, just a line that said, "I see you." The door moved again. Portia filled the frame as if the building had been designed for her. Behind her, a man in a linen blazer hovered, pale around the mouth. The smell of something expensive rode in, citrus deeper than the office cleaner, a scent that meant yacht decks and quiet settlements. "I want this resolved." Portia's voice had steel again. It was a moment, it got heated. "And we can deal with this without turning it into..." "Ma'am," Blanco said. He didn't raise his tone. "You'll wait outside until we've collected evidence and statement. Then you'll come in, and you'll sit, and you'll answer. You'll also keep your phone in your bag." He held out a clear tray like he'd done this 100 times and never liked it. Portia stared at the tray. Her jaw flexed once. She placed the phone on the plastic like a jewel she was loaning to a museum, and let the door touch her shoulder when she stepped back. An irritation she absorbed without comment. Rowan exhaled. His hands had stilled. Blanco nodded at the camera. "Your surveillance?" he asked. And when Rowan said yes, the older cop's mouth tipped, not a smile. "A shift, good. Tech will meet you on the floor. Don't pause anything." Nova's locket cooled. She felt the metal settle. She let the room work signatures, bags, receipts, and studied the edge of a post-it stuck to the monitor. "Check walk-in seals. Ba ling ling, ling ling ling." a different kind of chain, a different kind of custody. Keep what matters inside. Cold, intact. Blanco turned back. "Ma'am," he said to Nova, "describe the approach in your own words." And she did. Angle, distance, the tone before the first sentence, the perfume, the way laughter acts like a hand at your back, pushing you where you don't want to go. And when she finished, he nodded once and wrote a single word: composed. Damon shifted his chair. Leather sighed. He looked like a man doing math in his head. How far this goes? Who will call? Which of his shareholders will pretend concern while asking whether he needs a statement drafted? And when he caught Nova watching him, he gave the smallest shrug. "We're here. We stay. Outside." A plate broke. The sound carried faint but clean. Grace flinched in sympathy, then smiled at herself for flinching. A quick apology to the body for doing what bodies do. The younger officer sealed the phone copy. He wrote the time on the seam. Blanco initialed it, then offered Nova a card with a case number in block letters, the kind you could read upside down, and beneath it, in smaller script, a direct line. "We'll be around," he said. "Don't talk to anyone about this who isn't us or your counsel. Don't post. Don't respond. Let the record walk." Portia's perfume thinned in the hall. The camera's red dot kept breathing. Rowan straightened his tie and faced the officers like a man who had chosen a side and knew it would cost him something he hadn't priced when he woke up this morning. Nova stood. Her chair released her with a small, sticky kiss. She touched the locket without looking down, felt the hinge under her thumb, and in that hinge heard a door that would open again and again. No applause, no speech, just the simple work of something made to hold, still holding. The vent breathed. Paper rustled. And as Blanco opened the door to bring Portia into the light that doesn't flatter, the tiny clasp at Nova's throat clicked once more. A quiet vote recorded in metal. The sound of a record beginning to keep itself. Portia took the chair like a throne, and then realized it wasn't. The leather sagged in the middle. She set her shoulders anyway, smoothed the white bandage of a linen cuff, and aimed her face toward the camera's red dot, as if it were a lens she could charm into forgetting. Officer Blanco placed the clear tray with her phone on the desk. He didn't sit. The younger officer stood near the door, hands at his belt, eyes soft but not loose, and the air conditioner sent a steady ribbon of cool across the back of Nova's neck that felt, suddenly, like water finding a crack. "Name for the record," Blanco said. "Portia Avery Harrow." She delivered it like a verdict, and let the syllables hang a second longer than needed, then flicked a glance at Damon, as if testing which surfaces would reflect her best. Blanco's pen made a slow whisper. He read the date and time into the recorder. "Tell me, in your words, what happened," he said, and left the space open. No handrail, no edge. Portia's mouth moved as if tasting phrasing. "I approached a table to inquire about a seating mix-up," she said. She watched Blanco's face the way a driver watches fog. The woman Nova responded in a way that felt aggressive, and I put up a hand to create space. The younger officer didn't smile. Open hand to the face creates space. His voice was gentle, Midwestern, no spike in it. The question landed like rain on a windshield, unavoidable and plain. Portia's fingers touched her necklace, then stopped. "Emotions were high," she said. "It got heated. I regret that," she added. Regret shaped like a wine glass, polite, stemmed, empty. Damon's chair creaked. Blanco lifted a hand, a palm that said, "Wait. Ms. Harrow, several witnesses and 2 cameras cover your approach. We'll sync the angles. For now, keep to facts," he said. And the word sync rewired the room's temperature, pulling it down a degree. Rowan hovered by the printer. Grace stood at the edge of the wall, She held a fresh stack of paper towels and a small bottle of club soda like offerings to a kitchen fire. No one had asked her to fight. Portia's eyes tracked Grace. "You," she said. "You saw the reservation list. You know who I am." And the line landed with a thud in the quiet. A self-addressed letter that forgot to put on a stamp. "Ms. Harrow," Blanco said again, "this is not that kind of room." The vent ticked, paper settled. Nova felt the locket cool against her skin and pictured the hinge inside. Two pieces turning on a pin. Everything held by a point you never see until it fails. Blanco asked about distance. He asked about words used. Portia answered like a person stepping over puddles in shoes that shouldn't be wet. And the record collected her steps without offering a hand. A knock broke the hum. Rowan cracked the door and Darcy Ledoux slid in sideways. A man shaped like a question mark in a charcoal suit that didn't believe in wrinkles. "Counsel," he said, not asking, and handed Blanco a card with edges sharp enough to cut toast. "You can advise," Blanco said. "You can't answer." Darcy smiled with half his mouth. "Understood," he said, and took a place behind Portia's shoulder, like a shadow that had paid for front-row seats. "Do we really need handcuffs for manners?" Portia murmured, mostly to herself, mostly to the camera. No one laughed. Damon rubbed his thumb against his wedding band once, twice, setting a rhythm only Nova could hear. The younger officer set her phone back in the tray, mirrored and sealed. He said, "Chain starts at 21:12, ends at 21:38. Custody, Blanco." And the way he placed the bag on the desk had the reverence of a librarian shelving a fragile map. "Ms. Harrow," Blanco said, "we'll need your hands." He paused, letting the sentence sit. "For photographs," he added when Portia's eyes sharpened. Dry mercy offered in 2 words. He used a small scale, a card with measurements. He didn't touch her skin. "Do you want my fingerprints too?" she said. "We're not there," he said. Yet, silence landed. The room gathered around it. Outside the office, the dining room had thinned to a hush of glass and soft shoes over mosaic tile. The barblender's wine rose once, and then remembered it didn't belong tonight. Darcy cleared his throat, more stage than cough. "My client is prepared to apologize," he said. He let the line trail, tempted to attach a price tag, decided against it, tried a different hook. "She's willing to donate to a cause of Miss Reed's choosing," and the name scraped the air like a fork wrong on porcelain. Nova held his gaze for a beat. "She can volunteer," she said, "preferably where eyes are open and hands are used for something other than performance. No spike in the voice, no tremble. Nothing to hang a counterpunch on." Darcy didn't blink. He set his jaw diagonally. "We'd like to avoid a spectacle," he said, and Rowan's laugh slipped out before he could weigh it. Quick and tiny, a spark jumping a wire it had no business touching. Blanco wrote. He named the offense on the form, battery 242 PC. He said for the recorder, "Not mutual," and Portia stared at his pen as if it were writing on her wrist. Mr. Duarte reappeared with 2 plastic waters, and the careful gait of a man who knows he might be told to sit back down. "For anyone who needs," he said. He handed one to Nova, one to the younger officer. Damon lifted a palm. "No thanks." And Duarte tucked the extra bottle into his jacket like a magician hiding a dove for later. Portia looked at Duarte as if trying to place him on a chart she recognized, and coming up blank. "You started this," she said under her breath, just enough for air to carry it to the desk, and no farther. He tipped his head, small, patient. "Ma'am, I started a video." The rest was already happening. Darcy's phone buzzed in the plastic tray. He pretended not to hear it. Rowan shifted weight. Grace's fingertips pressed the paper towel roll until the cardboard tube inside flexed, a tiny collapse on a scale she could control. "We'll need you at the station to complete processing," Blanco said. "Tonight," he added, and the word reconfigured the geometry, turned the office into a hallway with only one direction. Portia's mouth opened, then closed. Her heel clicked once against the tile. Darcy leaned in, whispered something low, a string of words, braided to look like a net bail. "Optics. Narrative. Time." Blanco gave Rowan a receipt for the mirrored drive. "Keep the original in place," he said. "No one pulls the plug. Let IT lock rights. We'll subpoena in the morning to formalize the hold." And Rowan nodded, the relief of procedure straightening his spine. Grace found Nova's eyes. "Do you want ice?" she asked. The offer was small and precise and exactly right, and Nova nodded, finally, letting the yes be a yes. And Grace vanished to fetch a zip bag that crackled and sweated against the skin when she came back. Damon moved his chair a hair closer. He didn't touch Nova's elbow. He let his knee find hers under the desk and rest there. A hinge in a different metal, and she felt her breath slow into the shape of that contact. "Ms. Harrow," Blanco said, voice even, "you are not under arrest at this moment. You are detained for investigation. If you choose to leave, you will be arrested for battery." He waited. "Which will it be?" Portia stared at the red dot on the camera, her jaw unlaced. "I'll go," she said, and the word came out like a coin she hadn't intended to spend tonight. The younger officer produced a slim paper packet. "This outlines your rights," he said. "Sign to acknowledge receipt." And Portia's pen scratched across the page, as if speed could change ink into something less permanent than a mark. Outside, a car horn peeped twice. A valet whistled a note back. The restaurant floor breathed, staff finding work to do with their hands folding napkins tighter than usual, polishing glass that was already clean, putting weight into small things, the way people do after big things have moved through the room. Darcy took the tray with her phone, tucked it into a leather folio, then seemed to remember the clear bag on the desk, and placed that sealed, labeled on top, a paper crown on a plastic head. He gave Damon a look designed to create a private hallway between them. Damon didn't walk down it. "Ms. Reed," Darcy said, courteous. "My client regrets. You'll have our counsel's number." Damon said. He didn't raise his voice. He let the sentence land and stop. A hand laid flat on a table to indicate cards would stay down for now. Blanco tipped his head toward the door. "Let's move," he said. The movement had choreography, Portia rising into her height, Darcy half a step behind, the younger officer in the lead to clear space, Blanco anchoring the end like a final period punctuation you couldn't argue with. When the door closed, the office lost 10 degrees of noise. Rowan leaned on the desk with both palms. Grace let the paper towels go, and they rolled once on the carpet and bumped her shoe with a soft, surprised sound. "Press will call in minutes," Rowan said. He sounded like a man hearing the ocean 3 blocks away. "I'll draft a holding statement and tell staff to refer all inquiries to me. If anyone posts, I'll send them home," he added, then stopped, aware of the line he'd just drawn for himself. "Don't discipline honesty," Nova said. Her voice was quiet. "Just protect the record." Rowan nodded, chastened by a request that wasn't a threat. Grace reached for the ice bag and adjusted its seal. "You tell me when it's too cold," she said, and something in her tone, practical, tender, unafraid, made Nova's throat ache in a way painkillers can't touch. "Mr. Duarte checked his watch. "My bus goes in 9 minutes. He said, "I'll come tomorrow if you need me." And Damon slid another card his way with a handwritten time they'd be at the station. And Duarte tucked it next to the spare water and tipped his cap he didn't wear. The vent sighed. The camera blinked. For a breath, nobody moved, and the quiet felt like a low tide exposing rocks you only learn the names of when you've cut your feet on them. Outside, the blender whined again. Grace smiled at the sound without humor. "Somebody still wants a daiquiri," she said, and the line slid across the room like a joke whispered under a church pew. Small relief, exact and earned. Nova's cheek throbbed under the cold. Her locket warmed from her skin. She turned the hinge under her thumb until it clicked once metal certifying itself, and looked at the door. The officers had just walked through, glass that held fingerprints in the right angle of light. Portia was gone from the room. Her perfume had thinned to a ghost, but the temperature of the glass carried, and the record kept writing, indifferent and precise, a line after a line after a line. The station smelled like old coffee and wet coats. Fluorescents buzzed like insects. Nova kept her palm flat on the intake counter and felt the laminate's shallow heat where other hands had waited. Officer Blanco slid a plastic tray beneath the glass. "IDs," he said, low enough that it didn't echo. Damon produced his license and a business card. Nova passed her state ID, and the locket she'd taken off so it wouldn't show in photos, the hinge brushing her skin with a small goodbye. A clerk named Sosa printed labels. The printer stuttered, then found rhythm. "Victim packet, medical referral, Marcy's law advisement," Sosa said, stacking forms with the bored grace of someone who can do a bureaucracy shuffle in her sleep. She circled boxes with a pink pen that looked like it should smell like strawberries. "Not an ER," Blanco said. "Urgent care down the hall. We'll photograph first," he added, and gestured left, past a bulletin board full of missing teeth and pancake breakfasts. Nova nodded and felt the ache where the cold had left her cheek. Pain warmed by movement the way a bruise announces itself in steps. In the photo room, the light was too honest. The backdrop was a tired blue. A young tech set an ABFO scale near her cheek with tweezers, calling out the time to the recorder and the badge number to the lens. His voice hushed in the chapel of procedure. "Holt neutral," he said. Nova looked past the camera. She found a spot on the wall where someone had tried to scrub graffiti and only lightened the paint. A pale square like a patch on a jacket that had seen better winter. Click. The flash cracked. She blinked and tasted metal, the tang that memory has when it jumps skin and lands in the mouth. And the locket in the tray outside answered with its own mute weight. Damon stood where he couldn't be in frame. His hands were empty on purpose. He kept his breathing even, but his shoulders were a fraction too square. The kind of posture a man builds over years of convincing rooms he's already won. "Profile," the tech said. Nova turned. The scale's tiny hash marks felt like someone measuring a coastline with a ruler, better suited to books. When it was done, the tech sealed a card in a clear sleeve. He wrote her name in block letters. "Chain begins at 2341. Forensic imaging," he said to nobody and everyone, and handed the sleeve to Blanco like passing a candle that can't afford drafts. They moved to interview 2. It was colder there. A single camera winked red above a clock that had stopped at 7:12 years ago and never been corrected. Time pinned like a butterfly and left to fade. Blanco slid water across the table. "Recorder on," he said. "Ms. Reed, I'm going to ask you to walk me through what happened in your own words." And he waited the quiet out as if silence were a suspect worth giving rope. She told it again, smaller this time, short sentences, the table edge pressed against her ribs, the sting rising when she reached the place where a hand chose her face over space, and she kept her voice level by watching the second hand that didn't move. Blanco didn't fill gaps. He let them breathe. He asked clarifying questions the way a carpenter uses a plumb line, soft corrections to make sure the wall wouldn't list later. Any prior contact with Ms. Harrow? No. Any threats after lawyer offered a donation, she said, and the word donation tasted like old sugar between teeth. He repeated back. He slid the statement over with a ballpoint that had the department's website printed in a font too cheerful for nights like this. She read each line and saw where words flattened the edges, then signed anyway because paper isn't a person. It's a record you tend like a plant in bad soil. A knock. Lena Cho entered with her tote and a winded look. Deputy District Attorney on call. Hair pulled back with a tortoiseshell clip like a borrowed blade. Evening, she said, which was generous. Her eyes went to Nova's cheek, and then to Damon, as if recalculating weight on a scale. I'll be brief, she said. This qualifies as misdemeanor battery, with enhancements possible if bias motive is supported. And the way she laid the words down had no flourish, only corners. We'll file in the morning. She glanced at Blanco. You have witness statements and video mirrored. On ice, he said. Owners cooperating. Civilians too. Good, she said, and sat, the chair objecting in a small plastic groan. Ms. Reed, Lena said. Pivot gentle. You will be contacted. You'll have a say about plea versus trial. My job is weight and gravity, not spectacle. She pushed a card forward. Call me if anyone asks you to sign anything not printed by my office. Damon leaned in a hair. What about the media? Hungry, she said. Let them be. Don't feed them. Tell them the case is with our office, and you trust the process. Then, hang up. Damon's mouth twitched like he'd heard a joke. Nobody told. I run a company, he said. They won't hang up. Then you do, Lena said. Not unkind. You get one life. Nova watched Lena's fingers while she talked. Naked cuticle. Ink smudge on the side of her ring finger. A left-handed tell. She lived with pens, not press conferences. A detective stuck his head in. Counsel for Ms. Harrow is here, he said. Wants to know ETA for cite and release. Lena's jaw clicked once. Hinga repositioned. Cite. We're going to book, she said. The detective took it like rain. Booking is full, he said. We can process, print, release on O.R. with a date. The room collected the information and moved around it. Furniture shifted by a fact. Lena checked Nova's face again. Do you want a protective order tonight? Nova felt Damon's knee find her calf. A quiet yes, trying not to be an answer for her. She breathed around the question like it had edges. I want space that isn't paper, she said. Lena nodded once, absorbing the difference between remedy and relief. We'll ask for a no-contact condition at arraignment. Tonight, if they call you, block. If they show up, you call us first. Not him, she added, flicking a look at Damon that said, love isn't a plan. They worked the forms. Sosa returned for signatures. A victim advocate brought a brochure that didn't fix anything and gave it anyway, carefully, like a band-aid for a wound you can't see, but have to acknowledge for the ledger. On the way to medical, they cut through property. Shelves stared back with plastic bags full of rings and knives and wallets. Life in Ziploc limbo. Nova's locket sat in its small tray on the clerk's desk, while the clerk stepped away to photocopy an ID. The hinge caught a beam from the overhead and flashed a thin line of light, like a small lighthouse pretending to work for ships that would never come. Damon paused. He lifted 2 fingers toward it and then stopped. The way you do in museums, when an alarm you can't see waits to educate you about nearness. 2 minutes, the clerk said, without turning. Don't touch anything. Nova smiled without humor. Story of tonight, she said. Damon's half smile matched it, thin and practical. the kind you wear to keep from cracking your teeth. Medical was a retired office with a cot and a nurse in a Dodgers sweatshirt. Name's Clara, she said. Sit. Tilt toward me. And the nitrile gloves snapped soft, blue as the backdrop in the photo room. Clara palpated along the cheekbone. Tender here. Yes. Nova kept her shoulders from jumping. No swelling at the orbit. You're lucky, Clara said. Ice for 20. Enfin. For 2. Repeat. Ibuprofen with food. If you see floaters or get a headache that bullies you, ER tonight. She wrote it on a plain sheet and added a smiley face, before she remembered where she was, and drew a small line through the eyes. Chain of custody for the swab, Clara asked. Blanco appeared with a form before the sentence finished. Clara rolled a sterile swab across Nova's lip, where the inside had bitten down. She placed it in a tube, taped the cap, signed across the seam. The tube went into a bag that went into a hand that wrote a date that would matter if any lawyer tried to say it didn't. Any metal taste? Clara asked. A little, Nova said. It'll fade. Clara said. Everything does. Even the good things. She winced at herself. Sorry. It's late. They stepped back to the bullpen. Rowan stood near the door in his black blazer. Eyes brighter than caffeine, explains. I followed, he said. Sheepish. Staff's safe. I issued a statement we're cooperating fully. Zero tolerance for harassment. We're closing for a deep clean tomorrow. And he offered the last part, like a joke that didn't ask for a laugh. Lena scanned him like a barcode. You the manager? Yes. You're a witness. No more statements beyond logistics, she said. If press camps outside the restaurant, you feed them coffee and no comments. You don't leak video. You don't play editor. Rowan swallowed. I already sent a clip to counsel, he said. Then to Nova. Your counsel? Fast. The words tripping over each other in their hurry to land on the right side of a line he'd only just learned existed. Nothing public. I swear. Keep it there, Lena said. He nodded. Chastened. In his breast pocket. His phone buzzed. He didn't reach for it. And that was growth in real time. Half an inch taller. Darcy's voice carried from the opposite corridor. Optics are terrible, he said. Too loud. To someone who wasn't there. Blanco glanced that direction and then back at Nova. You can go, he said. We'll call you tomorrow for updates. He looked at Damon. Drive the long way home. Why? Damon asked. Cameras. Blanco said. They like straight lines. In the lobby, night pressed against the glass. A camera crew waited across the street. Lenses like eyes that didn't blink. Rowan lifted his chin toward a side exit. Service door, he said. It smells like bleach and rain. But it's honest. They took it. The alley was wet from a line of lazy sprinklers. A dumpster hummed like a tired animal. Damon gave Nova his jacket. She didn't argue. And the heat at the collar smelled faintly of cedar and the inside of their hall closet. At the car, she paused with her hand on the handle. The locket lay cool against her throat again. Paper. Reclaimed. Metal return. She opened it and looked at the two small photos, her mother's eyes like a mirror, her own younger face next to them, Hinge holding the past and present in an angle that changed with breath. What are you thinking? Damon asked. That tomorrow is a machine, she said, and that I don't want to get stuck in its gears. He didn't offer fixes. He put the key in and waited. In the rear view, the station's fluorescence trembled into a single white smudge against the night. A small square of light you could mistake for a star if you wanted to. They pulled out slow. The tires rolled through a fan of fallen jacaranda blossoms, purple smearing in faint wet arc. Nova watched the color lift and blur in the side mirror until the alley turned, and they were back on a street with lanes and numbers and rules that mostly worked. The city moved around them at its late-hour hum. distancier, a bus sighing as it knelt for someone with a heavy bag, air bleeding out with patience, and she felt her chest match it. A body choosing to lower itself so someone else could climb in. She touched the locket once. The hinge clicked, soft as a metronome. Then she let it fall flat. Metal, settling against skin, a small weight that didn't decide anything, but kept time with the part of her that did. Morning came in slices through the blinds. Dust drifted like slow snow. Nova lay still and listened to the camera crews outside, arguing about a power strip, as if extension cords were global policy. Coffee bloomed in the kitchen. Damon moved quietly, cupboard doors guided shut by fingertips. He set a mug on the nightstand and didn't touch her until she turned her face toward him, the bruise deepening under the soft light, like ink pulled by gravity. Lena emailed, he said. Arraignment at 1, misdemeanor, likely OR. He watched the line of her mouth like it were a pulse. Nova sat up. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and old paper. Her locket turned under her collarbone and settled, hinge kissing skin with the tiny click that made thought line up for a second. Outside, a drone buzzed. It dipped and corrected. Insect with a legal team. Damon crossed to the window and angled the blind with one finger, the slat scratching against another like teeth. Don't, she said. He stopped. You want me to call the off-duty guys? He asked. They'll build a perimeter. Let the law have the first say, Nova said. She swung her legs out of bed and felt the floor cool and unjudging. I'm not spending the rest of the week living inside a velvet rope. In the kitchen, the radio hummed low between stations. Rowan texted, service entrance secured. Staff briefed. You okay? She typed back with thumbs that remembered chalk dust and attendance lists. Times I'm upright. Don't talk to anybody without Lena Times, and watch the typing ellipses struggle and disappear. They left through the garage. Damon's sedan smelled like leather. Fin cedar, a trace of last winter's road salt, hiding in seams. As the gate rose, microphones lifted like prairie grass in a wind that arrived on cue. Ms. Reed, did you provoke her? Mr. Vale, are you weaponizing the courts? Do you forgive Patricia? Camera glass did what eyes won't, didn't blink, didn't flinch, only reached. Damon kept his hands at 10 and 2. Nova kept her mouth closed and her gaze forward. At the end of the block, a school crossing guard raised a stop sign at a single bicyclist, and the world obeyed. Red octagon trumping every headline. At the courthouse, air conditioning hit like a refrigerated breath. Marble held the nights cool and refused to share it. A deputy pointed them through the magnetometer. Nova placed her locket in the plastic dish. Metal against molded plastic. Hinge whispering as if to say, we've done this before in other eras, other buildings. Lena met them with a folder and shoes made for corners. Judge Patel, she said, by the book. No grandstanding. Her eyes flicked to the cameras setting up in the corridor. You'll sit second row. Don't react. Will there be a hate crime enhancement? Damon said, voice low. Evidence of bias is developing, she said. What I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt today is the slab. That's the clean cut. We build from there. They moved as a unit through a hallway that smelled like printer toner and old varnish. A man on a bench fed crackers to a toddler who crushed each one before eating it. A ritual of control. Damon brushed Nova's elbow with the back of his hand, a touch small enough to pass as air. In Department 42, the clock worked. The second hand hunted each notch like it meant it. Reporters filled the back row. A sketch artist, shaded with the side of her pencil, making a courtroom look like a cathedral with a humming fluorescent choir. Patricia Harrow entered with a lawyer and a scarf that cost what a semester used to. Her face was bare of makeup, and calculation wore softer shoes. She didn't look at Nova. She found a point near the judge's bench and held it like a lifeline. "All rise," the clerk said. Judge Patel's robe moved less like fabric and more like weather. He took the bench, scanned the calendar, and made a short world of the morning. "Harrow." "Here," counsel said, "we're entering a plea of not guilty." Lena stood. "People request a no-contact order and surrender of passport," she said. "Not harsh, not soft. Defendant has substantial resources and an active media apparatus. The risk of witness harassment is non-zero." Patricia's counsel rose with the smoothness of a man who'd dry-cleaned the word times, objection times, out of his posture. "No criminal history," he said. "My client is a mother and a philanthropist. She will comply. We ask for OR without conditions beyond standard." Judge Patel looked down, then up. His voice trimmed the day to fit. "OR granted. No contact order in place. Violations will be treated as violations. Next date, 3 weeks. Discovery within 10 days. The gavel didn't fall. It didn't need to. Paper moved. Clerks moved. Air moved. The kind of tiny shifts that redirect rivers if you give them enough years. Midway through the corridor gauntlet, the twist arrived. Not from Patricia. From Damon's phone, 3 vibrations. Then a 4th, the pattern he'd set for anything that could light a boardroom on fire. He stepped into a conference room that smelled like carpet glue and municipal hope. Nova stayed in the hall with Lena, who reviewed a list of discovery items like groceries you can't afford to forget. Through the glass, Nova watched Damon take the call and let silence do most of his talking. When he came out, his tie had migrated a half-inch, the corporate version of a limp. "What?" she said. "Board wants a special session," he said. PR flagged the phrase, "weaponizing the courts trending with my name." "A pension fund is nervous." It was dumb, and it was real. Nova closed her eyes and pictured the inside of the locket, the 2 faces that never blinked. "Go," she said. "I'm not leaving you in this," he said. "You're not," she said, and touched his sleeve. "You're taking your war to your battlefield. I'll take mine to mine." Lena nodded once as if they'd recited a statute correctly. He kissed Nova's temple under the blind corner of a security camera. "Call me if anything wobbles," he said. She watched him walk away into the hiss of the lobby, a man teaching an empire to sit and stay. Afternoon tasted like stale air and plastic water bottles. Lena set them at a small table in the DA bullpen, where a fan did all it could with a job too big. She slid over a copy of the consumer receipt for Patricia's scarf from the night before, itemized, time-stamped, an odd comfort in its pettiness. "We start with police reports and witness statements," Lena said. "Video too." She checked her phone. "And we just got a voicemail from a woman named Moira Harrow." Nova's brow tightened. "Family. Cousin," Lena said. "She says she has emails." She hit speaker and dialed back. Moira sounded like someone who laughed when she shouldn't and cried when she didn't. "I don't want to be part of this," she said, and then part of it anyway. "But Patty Patricia, she's been spiraling. She wrote me things. About who belongs where. About standards. I told her to stop. Would you be willing to forward those?" Lena said. Moira blew out a breath that made the microphone thud. "I don't want my aunt to cut me off," she said. "You could redact your address," Lena said. "We can subpoena later. But earlier is cleaner." Moira was quiet. The room waited with her. "Check your inbox," she said finally. "It's a burner account. I don't want them tracing me through the family plan." The email came like a small weather front. Subject line: Bland Times. Notes Times. and the attachments heavy with the kind of casual cruelty people put in writing when they assume nobody outside their mirror will read. Lena opened one. It was an RSVP to a gala, annotated with who to seat away from whom. Asterisk. No more than one table of dark dresses near the front, Patricia had typed, as if color were contagion. Below it, an aside about teachable moments in restaurant. Nova felt her hands go cool. The fan pushed air against her forearms. An unearned mercy. This helps motive, Lena said, and her face didn't change. It's not an enhancement by itself, but it paints the canvas. A commotion built near the elevators. Rovan appeared, breathless, hair rain-slick with sweat. Despite the dead heat day, they're outside the restaurant again, he said. Staffs rattled. Two influencers tried to stage a reconciliation lunch in the alley. Nova stood. Is anyone hurt? No, he said. But Olivia quit. She texted me a picture of her grandmother and said she didn't immigrate for this. Sacrifice doesn't always explode. Sometimes it folds quietly and leaves a key on the counter. Nova felt something in her loosen and then harden. We'll cover her rent for 2 months, she said to Damon's empty chair. Then to Rowan, tell her. From me. Lena's phone chirped. Ms. Reed. A deputy's voice said, process server in the lobby. Looking for you. Civil. Lena sighed, a sound shaped like a fist unclenching. Of course, downstairs, a man in a cheap suit held a manila envelope like it burned. Mrs. Reed, he asked, although her photo was stapled to the front page, you've been served. Inside a draft complaint, defamation, intentional infliction, tortious interference. The words were heavy furniture kicked into a hallway to block it. Pre-litigation theater, Lena said, eyes tracking the paragraphs like a hunter in tall grass. No filing stamp. They want you rattled. Nova turned a page and found a screenshot of her private post from last night, 2 lines. Times I want to sleep. I want to key it. Asterisk counsel had annotated it as campaign. The static inside her head thickened. She stepped back until her shoulder hit the cool marble and let it ground her. Am I safe to go home? She asked. Yes, Lena said. You're not a defendant in anything real today. Criminal case remains our focus. We respond if they file. Until then, we ignore. On the steps, the sun hit like a fact. Nova's phone buzzed with numbers she didn't know, and one she did her mother's, a Detroit area code that always landed like a prayer and a warning. She answered under a tree that smelled like sap and sidewalk dust. Baby, her mother said. I saw the news. Nova could hear the old refrigerator in the background, the one that hummed like a baritone with a secret. I'm okay, Nova said. You don't sound okay. Her mother said, not accusing, just accurate. When a dog snaps, you don't let it lick your hand to prove you're a good person. You step back, and you keep your skin. Nova laughed once. It cracked and mended in the same breath. I love you. I know you do. Her mother said, eat food that isn't coffee. Sleep in a room with the TV off. And remember, hinges hold doors, not walls. You don't have to carry the whole house. Nova closed her eyes. The hinge. She touched the locket. It warmed under her finger, a small sun she could move. By dusk, the cameras had thinned to one tired freelancer, nursing a soda. Rowan texted a photo of the staff meal. He'd cooked a mess of rice and eggs and scallions in a pan big enough to baptize someone. Asterisk, we're still a place. Asterisk, he wrote. Asterisk. Even when nobody eats, Nova stood at the back window and watched the streetlights cycle from nothing to sodium to a halation that made everyone's face a little less honest. Inside the house, Damon rehearsed numbers to a room of glassy faces over video. persuading money to be patient with blood. She flipped the locket open, looked at the two images, and found in them not answers but stamina. She closed it. The hinge clicked. A note struck and held outside. A drone passed, a brief mosquito in the night, and moved on. The green room smelled like old coffee and carpet glue. LEDs hummed, cold and steady. Nova pinched the bridge of her nose, while a producer with a headset threaded a lav mic up the inside of her blouse, as if threading a needle through a wound. 3 minutes, the producer said. The studio across the hall pulsed in blue. A monitor looped the show's bumper city lights at speed, a voiceover promising clarity like a late-night infomercial. Lena had warned her, keep it brief, no new facts. We don't win the case on a couch, she'd said. We only avoid losing it. Nova tried to slow her breath. Inhale through the mouth, exhale through the nose. The trick her mother taught when the world wanted to climb inside her ribs. She touched the locket. The hinge warmed under her fingertip, a small, live thing. The host shook hands, as if he were closing on property. Grateful you're here, he said, teeth like a billboard. He smelled faintly of eucalyptus and hurry. They went live in a wash of light that erased pores and doubt. Ms. Reed, the host said, voice buttered for broadcast. You've been quiet. Why speak now? I'm here because silence got mistaken for guilt, Nova said. Her voice felt like a rope with weight on it. I was assaulted in public. I reported it. I'm letting the system work. He nodded. A metronome of empathy. Do you accept Patricia Harrow's apology? She apologized to the camera. Nova said, not to me. A beat. The host's eyes shifted. Producers talk with pupils. We have a caller, he said, cheerful like a trap. Patricia's counsel. Mr. Jansen, are you on? Static. Then a voice cut like paper. Ms. Reed, Jansen said. Would you agree that you've benefited from this incident? Followers. Press. Sympathy. Nova centered her hands on her knees. Being hit has not been a growth strategy, she said. Are you monetizing? He said. A GoFundMe. Perhaps. The studio air thinned. Someone else started one, Nova said. I asked them to shut it down. They did. Isn't your husband's company leveraging this to kill a deal with my client's husband? Jansen pressed. The host glanced at camera 2. Nova kept her gaze on the glass lens cyclops. Pitiless. Bored. I'm not a mergers and acquisitions department, she said. I'm a woman who got slapped eating dinner. They cut to break like a guillotine raised halfway. Great TV, the host said, already on to the next segment. Nova peeled the mic tape from her skin and left the glue behind. Outside, heat pressed down on the sidewalk. A man with a leaf blower moved dust that would be back by evening. Nova's phone vibrated twice, then again a pattern she'd come to dread. Asterisk. Call me. Asterisk. Damon texted. Asterisk board meeting advanced. She ducked into the parking garage. It smelled like rubber and old rain. The signal died and returned in harsh slices as she reached the stairwell and let the door thud soft behind her. Hey, he said. When she called, he sounded like a man in a conference room, trying not to be a man in a conference room. They want me to take a leave. Her chest tightened. The air lifted. For how long? 2 weeks. Optics, he said. The word sour. They think it'll calm the fun. You didn't do anything, she said. Neither did you, he said. Optics don't care. They just reflect. A beat. I can fight. But if I fight, the story becomes me. She heard the dry rustle of suits shifting in chairs. The click of a capped pen. Do what keeps you, not what keeps them, she said. Silence. Then the smallest exhale. I'll step aside, he said. On paper, paper burns, she said. Meet you at home. After one stop, she said. I need to put my hands on something that isn't a microphone. On the way to the literacy center, she cut through streets. She'd driven as a volunteer bakeries, barbers, the laundromat with the sun-bleached mural of a bluebird, bigger than hope. Inside, the center still smelled the same paste and old crayon, a ghost of orange cleaner, row of plastic chairs, bulletin boards stabbed with flyers for ESL classes, and a lost parakeet. Miss Alma hugged her with arms that had folded thousands of children into safety. "Your face," Alma said, palm hovering above the bruise like a blessing that didn't dare touch. "I'm okay," Nova said, and they both pretended that was enough. She sat cross-legged on the carpet and read aloud to 6 kids who thought books were worlds, with doors you could open if you said the words right. Her throat loosened. The room's hum threaded through her bones. On the 3rd story, her phone vibrated again. Alma watched her face. "Go," Alma said. "Come back," Alma added, because she knew the kind of leaving that stayed. In the parking lot, a woman in a denim jacket leaned against a sun-stunned sedan, hands shoved deep into pockets like she didn't trust them. "Nova." The voice had the seesaw cadence of someone used to holding 2 truths at once. "Moira," Nova guessed. The woman pushed off the car, nodded, then almost smiled. "Cousin, but that word fits badly right now," she said. They sat inside the car so the heat wouldn't hear. Moira's air freshener was a cardboard pine tree that smelled like an idea of a forest. She took a phone from her bag and scrolled with the focused guilt of a surgeon. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, thumb hovering. "You called us first." Nova said, "That's already something." Moira hit play. Patricia's voice filled the car, smaller without a room to perform in, tinny through the speaker, but crisp enough to cut. "She'll learn," Patricia said. "Some people need a lesson in where the front door is." Moira's hand trembled. "It was a voice memo to me. After the charity board meeting," she said, eyes on the dash. "She was drunk on being right." Another clip. Patricia again names the word standards, the laugh that never reached eyes. "And if she cries, good. Maybe that's currency where she comes from." The heat pressed at the windows. A dog wanting in. Nova swallowed metal. "Can we give this to the DA?" she asked. Moira chewed her lip until it went pale, then flushed. "You can," she said. "Just, I won't burn you," Nova said. "Your name stays out until the court forces it in." Moira let out a breath that shook. "My mother says blood is blood," she said, "but sometimes blood is just gravy. You know," she forced a laugh. Dark humor. "Sorry." "Thank you," Nova said. Moira looked at her then, straight on. "I wish I'd stopped her before anyone needed to be brave in a restaurant," she said. Traffic hummed. Somewhere, a siren doppled the day into a thin line, and then let it go. They sat in the quiet beat and let the car recool. At home, Damon had packed his desk into 2 banker's boxes and placed them in the living room as if they were guests. The interim CEO's already using the word stability like a sedative, he said, trying a smile that wouldn't set. He'd taken off his tie. His shirt collar showed a faint ring where the day had rubbed. "Did you sign?" she asked. He held up a copy of the board resolution. Paper, lines, signatures like seismographs. She ran a fingertip over his name. It felt like nothing, the way a scar does when it's new. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is the part in the movie when we pretend we did this for a quiet life," he said, eyes on the boxes. "And then someone knocks on the door," she said, as if trained. The doorbell rang. They both laughed one note, brittle and grateful. Rovan, on the step, holding a foil pan that steamed into the cooling evening. "I made food," he said, shouldering past the cameras that had drifted back by dinner. It's not a solution, but it's a start. They ate at the island, forks against aluminum, soft as rain. The pan was heavy with arroz con pollo, salt and bright lime. For 10 minutes, they were a table and not a headline. Lena slid in on the back of a text. Times Moira's files received. Meeting first thing. Nova sent a thumbs up and a heart, shorthand for 1,000 sentences she didn't have breath for. She opened her locket and set it on the counter, face up. Hinge catching the last light. Press wants a quote about your leave. Nova said to Damon. They can have the standard. He said, focus on the mission. Grateful for the team. Yada yada. She smiled. Weak but real. Not the week I planned, she said. When does anyone ever plan the week that shows up? He said. The house settled as night put its hand on the roof. The cameras outside traded shifts. The drone laws gave up at sunset. On the TV, muted. A panel of faces argued in captions about civility, the words scrolling like ants on sugar. Nova stood at the window. Streetlights lifted on, one by one, patient as tide. Kids on bicycles drew slow figure eights, rubber whispering against pavement. She flipped through the printed board resolution, the legalese turning in her hands like fish that wouldn't be caught. She stopped at his signature again, felt the indent the pen had bitten. What's it cost us? She asked, not to be answered, but not rhetorical. Less than your soul, Damon said gently, and more than my pride. He leaned against her shoulder. We'll build it back. We built it once. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Beverly Hills Exchange. A message arrived. Times, you think you won. She didn't answer. She took a screenshot and forwarded it to Lena with 2 words. Times, probation, violation, asterisk, and set the phone face down so the screen couldn't keep talking. The night needed a quiet beat. She clicked the locket closed. The hinge made its small note. In the pause after, she heard the refrigerator hum, the distant thud of a car door, Damon's breathing, steadying next to her. Paper could catch fire, metal could hold. She lifted the locket again and felt its warmth return to her skin. Across the glass, her reflection hovered half light, half room. A woman split and whole. Outside, a stray cat glided along the fence top, perfectly balanced over a property line no one else could keep. The courthouse air was refrigerated and lemon bright. Fluorescents buzzed like angry bees. Nova palmed the locket at her throat, the hinge warming against the climate-controlled chill. Lena met her outside Department 32, with a legal pad tucked under one arm and a paper coffee she'd forgotten to drink. Stay close, she said. We'll thread a needle and try not to bleed. An investigator with a crew cut. Salazar held the door. Inside, the DA's conference room wore institutional beige, like a belief system. On the table lay a stack of manila envelopes and a clear evidence bag with a phone sealed inside. Chain of custody log clipped to its belly like a passport. Moira sat at the far end, denim jacket buttoned up to the throat as if courage zipped. Her fingers worried a paper napkin into lace. She didn't look up until Nova sat, share legs squeaking over tile. You okay? Nova asked. No, Moira said, and almost smiled. But I'm here. A forensic tech rolled in a pelican case, black and scuffed. Stickers from conferences like a touring musician. She set up quick gloves, a right blocker, laptop sprouting cables, names Mia. She said, we're going to image the device, verify hashes, and no one's going to breathe wrong while we do. Salazar read the chain of custody aloud, like grace before a meal. Collected by Moira Nash, voluntary surrender. Time, date, transferred to investigator Salazar. Sealed with tamper-evident tape. Lucina. The pen clicked. The room listened. Mia cracked the seal. Hands sure, movements small. The phone looked ordinary smudged glass. A cracked corner, hope and guilt baked into the case. She connected it to the right blocker to the machine, checked the green light, didn't rush, creating a forensic image, she said, generating MD5 and SHA-256 to confirm integrity. Numbers crawled across the screen like ants that knew where they were going. Nova watched the reflection of those numbers in the glass of the frame on the wall. A certificate in cheap metal. Lena slid a permission form toward Moira. This gives us consent to search the audio files only, she said. We keep to scope. We don't go digging through your life. Moira's hand shook, steadied. Scope, she said, and signed. They waited. The copier in the hall hummed and stopped. A mechanical breath. Dust motes hung in the fluorescent wash, like slow snow. Why are we doing the dance in here and not a courtroom? Moira asked. Because a case is won in rooms like this, Lena said. Court is just where we show our work. Mia turned the screen. Hashes match, she said. We have a clean image. Now we listen without touching the source. Lena nodded. Play the first one. Patricia's voice filled the room, that crisp ledger of contempt. She'll learn, it said, and the word curled like smoke. Then Zot. Second clip. A laugh that didn't require joy. Names. Standards. A door that wasn't hers to close. Nova watched Lena, not the waveform on the screen. Lena's face didn't change, but her pen stopped tapping. Salazar's jaw rolled like a man who'd given up gum. Context, Lena asked. After the board voted to cut funding for the literacy bus, Moira said. She called it a photo op on wheels for people who don't buy books. A. Nova's knuckles anchored to the tabletop. You recorded that. The call was to me, Moira said. California's one-party consent. I checked before I betrayed the bloodline. Mia printed a single-page report, the hashes, the file paths, the extraction method, and slid it into a fresh evidence sleeve. Salazar resealed the phone, logged the time, initialed the tape. The ritual turned ordinary objects into artifacts. Arraignments this afternoon, Lena said. We'll push for a restraining order with electronic monitoring. No contact, no third-party contact. We cite the message you got last night. You think you won? Salazar repeated, his mouth flattening. Real Socratic. I'm not looking for a win. Nova said. What are you looking for? Moira asked. Soft. Wait to match the bruise, Nova said. They crossed the hallway to the courtroom. The hall smelled like floor wax and old anger. Reporters formed a respectful buzz saw at the checkpoint, low voices sharp as the wanding beep. Inside, the pews groaned under the day's grievances. The judge wore an expression that suggested she'd read more files than fiction. Court clerk called the case. The words hard-edged. Bored. Necessary. Patricia entered with her counsel. Jansen, blue suit, tailored to an angle. Her perfume reached the first row like ambition. She scanned the gallery until her eyes found Nova and slid off like oil from water. Your Honor, Jansen began. My client is a respected philanthropist with deep ties to alleged assailant, the judge said. Dry as paper. We'll skip the recitation of her invitations. Lena rose, neat as a page. People request a protective order, GPS ankle monitor, and surrender of passport. We proffer audio indicating intent to target and intimidate. She slid Mia's report and a transcript to the clerk, who stamped them with a thunk that felt like a door shutting. Jansen's smile tightened. Context, Your Honor. Fragments. No threat. Just unfortunate phrasing. Maybe that's currency where she comes from. The judge read. Eyebrows not moving. Which bank issues that? A low ripple ran the benches and died under the bailiff's glance. Jansen pivoted. Fast. Ms. Reed sought the spotlight. We are not litigating victim popularity. The judge said, save it for late night. The judge turned to Patricia. Do you understand the condition? Patricia nodded once, chin dipped, like it was expensive to live. I do. Speak up, the judge said. The microphone doesn't beg. Patricia cleared her throat. I do. The order rolled out no contact, no proximity within 100 yards. No messages, no proxies, no online shade wrapped as opinion, GPS monitoring, pre-trial check-ins, curfew when the bar's lit. If you breathe in Miss Reed's direction, it will be into a breathalyzer, the judge said. One dark laugh leaked from the back. The bailiff turned his head, and that was enough, Jansen muttered for the record. Patricia signed without looking at the lines. Ink dried fast in rooms like this. Outside, the heat had softened, the afternoon taking its foot off the neck of the city. Microphones sprouted like weeds at the steps. A woman with a podcast shoved forward. Ms. Reed, is this justice? Nova glanced at Lena. Justice is a road, not a parking spot, Nova said. They kept moving. On the plaza, Robert, the restaurant manager, waited. Shoulders a little bowed, tie loose as repentance. He carried a hard drive in a padded case like an organ donor. Can we talk? He asked. Lena measured him with one look, then nodded to a bench in the shade. The eucalyptus trees flicked at the light, releasing a clean, medicinal scent. A siren wound passed and faded. Thread pulled through fabric. I've got the raw CCTV, Robert said, placing the case on his knees. Original resolution. No overlay. No time-lapse. Why now? Lena asked. My owner told me to send selected clips. He said, I couldn't sleep. My grandmother cleaned houses 2 buses from here. She taught me how to scrub a floor and keep a spine. Chain of custody matters. Lena said, I pulled it myself at 0600, he said, eyes steady. Copied with the night auditor watching. Log the hash IT guy taught me last night. I brought the log. I didn't email. I didn't text. I carried it. Lena took the case without touching the latches. We'll receive it at the office. She said, you'll sign the intake. You may lose your job. I already did, he said, and the breath left him. Visible. They called it a restructuring of trust. Nova sat quiet in the ripple after that. A child squealed at the fountain across the plaza. Coins winked under moving water like small, bright lies. She reached for the locket and felt the hinge warm through the fabric. A private heat. Thank you, she said to Robert. He nodded. Eyes shiny, mouth set. I should have done it sooner, he said, standing. But sooner isn't a time machine. They walked to the DA's office together, an odd procession with a hard drive at its center. Security buzzed them in at intake. A clerk in glasses older than his shirt logged the case. The time, the signatures, the sticker that would turn a piece of plastic into a piece of evidence. Interview rooms are full, the clerk said. You can use the library. The library smelled like dust and law, a comfort and a warning at once. Shelves leaned with codes. No one loved, but everyone needed. Lena's phone lit a message from the judge's clerk, Times order signed, monitor by 6 p.m. Mia slipped in, already gloved, to receive the drive like a midwife. She wrote the hash out in block letters. Neat as a schoolteacher, Nova stood by the window and watched a fly trace the blind's edge. Trapped between light and glass, refusing to choose. Behind her, paper slid into folders, names onto forms, future into a box. The hum of the building rose and fell like a mechanical tide. Tomorrow we prep for preliminary hearing, Lena said. We'll call the elderly witness first, then the forensic, then Moira. We ladder truth. Will it hold? Nova asked. It will weigh what it weighs, Lena said. Our job is to bring the scale, They left at dusk. The sky over the Civic Center burned low, a smear of orange behind the concrete teeth. Damon's car pulled up, Rowan in the passenger seat, two silhouettes that knew her shape. "How'd it go?" Rowan asked, popping the door. "We added weight," she said. "That's the secret of balance," he said, grinning. "Put the right heavy in the right place." A text buzzed. Unknown number again. "You made enemies you can't see." She took a breath, forwarded, archived. The hinge at her throat stayed warm. On the drive home, the radio gave them a song from 10 years ago that had lived in every diner and back seat in the country. They didn't sing, they listened. At a red light, a billboard for a luxury tower flickered blue, then snapped white, "Live above it all." It promised. Nova felt the locket and thought of weight again, of gravity, not as punishment, but as proof. They turned onto their street. Camera vans idled without their lights, dark fish waiting. Inside, the house felt like a held breath. She set the locket on the dresser and watched it in the mirror. Metal catching the last ribbon of day, a small thing that stayed warm, no matter the room's cold. The stink hit first, burned rubber and sweet, oily smoke that clung to the back of the throat. Dawn hadn't warmed the asphalt yet. Nova stood in the alley behind the community center, watching black curls rise from what used to be the literacy bus. The paint had blistered into fish scales. Letters read here were warped to a melted groan. The door hung from a tortured hinge, metal cooled into a crooked question mark. A firefighter in a soot-smudged helmet lifted the caution tape with 2 fingers. "Arson looks likely," he said. "Origin at the rear wheel well. Accelerant smell. I'll let the lab speak." He stepped aside so she could see the inside the rows of donated paperbacks, curled like sleeping animals, spines split, pages ash-sifted to the floor. Rowan put a hand on the small of her back. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He stared at the hinge like it could tell them who had done it. A detective in a windbreaker crouched to photograph a footprint near the curb. No tread, just a smear. He bagged the charred remains of a plastic jug with tweezers, muttered to his notepad, moved on. Lena arrived with her suit jacket over a t-shirt, hair back, eyes already filing. "We document. We don't touch." She held out a Ziploc. Inside lay a snapped padlock, its belly split open, shank scorched. "Camera?" Nova asked. "The alley cam is a dummy," Rowan said, jaw tight. Budget rumor turned into reality. Nova reached for her locket and felt the heat of it even in the morning chill. She closed her fist around the metal until it pinched. Then she let her hand fall. "We still have a hearing," Lena said. Nova nodded. "We still walk." She took one last look at the bus and its sagged frame, and thought how heavy paper can be when it's turned to ash. The courthouse hallway smelled of floor wax, and something fried from a distant cafeteria. People clutched folders, coffee, hope. The judge's clerk waved them in with a pen like a baton. Department 19 was full. The kind of full that meant word had traveled. Whispers rose, eddied, died under the bailiff's glance. Jansen stood at counsel table with a legal pad and a grin that wanted to be a smirk. "People call your first witness," the judge said, eyes like 2 polished stones. "Mr. Hale," Lena answered. The elderly man with kind eyes moved to the stand. Careful, deliberate. He took the oath like it weighed something, his hands folded in his lap, blue veins, a map of time passed and work done. "What did you see?" Lena asked. He described the slap without embellishment, the way the room went silent, the sound like a book closed on a finger. He looked at Nova once, brief, apologetics, and then back at the judge as if that were the only safe horizon. Jansen cross-examined with a smile that showed every tooth. "Sir, your eyesight, 20/20 with these." the man said, tapping the corner of his glasses. And you have no bias against my client. I've met her twice, he said. Both times she cut the line. A thin laugh leaked from the gallery, then died. Jansen spread his hand, performed a weary sigh. No further. People call Mia Torres, Lena said. Mia rolled the Pelican case beside the stand like luggage on a red-eye. She laid out her kit with the reverence of a ritual gloves. Report. A thumb drive sealed and labeled. Her voice stayed level as she spoke about imaging. Hashes, a chain of custody words that turned zeros and ones into something the court could hold. You verified integrity. Lena asked. MD5 and SHA-256 hashes match. Mia said, any alteration would create a mismatch. And these recordings were extracted how, from a forensic image, the original device remains sealed in evidence. We worked off the copy. Jansen stood. Ms. Torres, isn't it true that audio can be selectively clipped to mislead? Anything can, she said. That's why we produce logs. They're in my report. In your opinion, these clips might— Not my opinion, she said, meeting the judge's eyes. My math. A suppressed snort from Damon's row. The judge didn't look up, but her mouth pressed a hint of a line that could have been approval. People call Moira Nash, Lena said. Moira approached the stand in a plain dress, hair pulled back, a denim cuff peeking from her sleeve. She took the oath, exhaled, found Nova in the room, and then looked away quickly, as if the connection might burn. You recorded certain conversations with the defendant, Lena said gently. Yes. Why? Moira twisted a ring she'd borrowed from nowhere. Because when someone keeps rewriting the past, you start taking notes. She confirmed dates, times, the call where Patricia laughed, the board meeting comments about standards, the phrase like a glass shard with no give. Lena moved to admit the transcript, the audio clip. The judge accepted them as if she'd been expecting the weight. Jansen rose, smooth as a blade. Ms. Nash, you're related to my client by marriage, Moira said, and you stand to gain by damaging her reputation. What would I gain? Jansen's smile didn't reach his eyes. A clean break. A narrative. A new circle. Moira looked at the jury box like there might be people in it. There's no clean break, she said softly. There's only bleeding where you thought there was bone. He changed angles. You hate her, he said. I have loved her, Moira said, and the rim of her voice wavered. I hate what she chooses. He paused, caught off guard for half a breath. No further. People call Robert Valdez, Lena said. Robert carried his truth in a padded case. He swore in, set the hard drive on the rail, and placed both hands on the wood, like a man at a confessional. You were asked to deliver selected clips, Lena said. Yes. By whom? My boss, owner's office. And you instead delivered the raw feed. I couldn't cut out the parts that hurt, he swallowed. My grandmother would have cuffed my ear. Lena's mouth softened. Described the chain of custody. Robert did. Careful and plain, pulled at 0600. Night auditor watching. Logged the hash. Walked it across town. Did anyone else handle it before you turned it over? No. Jansen stepped in. Mr. Valdez, you're a restaurant manager, not a trained forensic specialist. I learned fast, Robert said. Integrity isn't a graduate program. Let's talk motive. Jansen said, smile thin again. You were terminated. Correct, Robert nodded. So you're angry. I'm tired. Robert said, angry wastes gas. The reporter Rao scribbled like wind through reeds. The judge looked at the clock and at the council tables. Take 10, she said. In the hallway, phones flared like fireflies. A clip was trending, a 30-second edit of Nova's face, white lit by votives, with some caption about performative tears. and a GoFundMe sidebar that wasn't hers. Damon showed it to Rowan. Rowan shook his head like he could shake the world. Don't chase it, Lena said. It's chasing us, Nova answered, voice low. Lena's phone pinged. She glanced, then looked at Moira. Text from a number labeled G. Moira's mouth tilted. Gregory, she said. He always thinks labels win war. Read it, Lena said. Moira Didfois, stop now. You don't know what you're provoking. Asterisk. Then a second times the bus was an accident. Insurance will handle it. Her throat moved. He's lying about the second part, she said. The family hired a fixer. He called him the beekeeper. And Bieber, the beekeeper, Damon said, moves in and smokes the hive. Moira said, no stings, no witnesses. Looks like nature. You can put that on the record. Lena asked. Moira's eyes flicked to the courtroom door, then to Nova. She took a breath like a dive. I can. They went back in. The judge reseated. Efficient. Lena recalled Moira for limited questions. Ms. Nash, you received messages this morning. Yes. From Gregory Hartwell. Yes. Content. She read them. Any other communications regarding the destruction of the literacy bus? Moira stared at a point above the judge's head, where the paint bubbled slightly under an old leak. A month ago, Patricia complained that the bus made her look stingy. Gregory said they'd handle the optics. He used the word beekeeper. He said, smoke first, then honey. Jansen objected. Hearsay and color and whatever else was in the toolkit. The judge allowed it for limited purpose motive, not truth of the arson. We'll see what the lab says about your smoke, she added, dry. Lena saved her last for Nova. Ms. Reed, she said, how long did you run the literacy bus? 2 years. Funded how? Small grants. Community donations. A piece of my paycheck. And what happened this morning? It burned, Nova said. I smelled it before I saw it. Will you replace it? Nova looked at the courtroom, the cameras, the marble, the woman at the defense table with a face like a locked door. I don't know, she said, but we'll keep reading. Jansen didn't cross. He whispered to Patricia. They both stared at the table like the wood might change teams. Court will take the matter under submission, the judge said. Prelim continues tomorrow. Meanwhile, the protective order stands. It is not a suggestion. She tapped her pen twice. The sound was small, final. Outside, heat rolled off the steps. Reporters called questions that sounded like shrapnel. Nova walked through them, with her eyes on the horizon line where the courthouse roof cut the sky. In the parking structure, the air was cool and smelled like dust and brake pads. Rowan opened the passenger door, then stopped, as if remembering whose seat he could offer. You okay? He asked. No, she said, but I'm here. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Asterisk. You keep collecting ash. Like it's proof. She forwarded it to Salazar with one thumb. Then she switched the phone off and listened to the garage's layered hum cars, footsteps, the far-off rattle of a shopping cart set free. They drove to the center. The bus was gone now, replaced by a rectangle of wet concrete, where a city crew had scrubbed and rinsed, leaving a clean shape inside a dirty world. Someone had left a carton of paperbacks in a milk crate beside the doorway. Handwritten note on top. Start again. Nova lifted the locket. The hinge was warm from her skin. She pressed it to her lips and tasted metal and smoke. Do we cancel the reading circle tonight? Rowan asked. No, she said. We move it inside. They carried folding chairs and the crate of books into the multi-purpose room. The fluorescent lights hummed. The AC clanked awake like an old dog. Rowan taped a sheet of butcher paper to the wall, words we keep, and uncapped a marker. The first kid arrived early, smelling like sunscreen and summer dust. eyes wide at the emptiness outside. "What happened to the bus?" he asked. "It got tired," Nova said. "We'll let it rest." By 7, the room was full. Robert slipped in late and sat in the back, hands on his knees, like someone who didn't know if he had permission to breathe. Moira stood in the doorway, then stepped inside and found a seat by the water cooler. She kept her phone face down. Nova opened a book with a singed dust jacket salvaged from the crate and began to read the first line. Her voice was steady, then stronger, filling the room, crossing the rectangle of light on the floor that the door left open. The hum of the building settled. Outside, a siren wound down the avenue and faded to the size of a thread. Rowan wrote 3 words on the butcher paper and underlined them once times. "We still read." When the circle ended, a woman pressed a 20 into Nova's palm and said nothing. A handyman volunteered a camera system. Real wires. No dummies. A teenager asked if he could paint a mural on the alley wall blue sky. A bus that didn't burn. They locked up at 9. On the way out, Nova lingered in the alley where the bus had been. The air held a faint ghost of smoke. A moth tapped at the security light. Persistent, delicate, alive. She reached for the locket, thumb finding the hinge by muscle memory. Heat met skin, a small, stubborn warmth in the cool night. Some things stay warm. Fog clung to the courthouse like gauze. The steps held last night's chill. Nova cupped a paper cup in both hands and let the steam wash her face. Security hummed under fluorescent glare. She dropped her keys, phone, the small locket she almost never removed, into the gray plastic tray. The locket slid, kissed metal, and knocked against the lip with a bright Trétourous ping. "Hold," the guard said, reaching for the wand. A man behind her sighed into his collar. Nova watched the locket spin to a stop and found the hinge with her thumb the way she always did. The belt jerked. The tray bumped the back of the X-ray mouth, just hard enough. The hinge popped, a tiny throat clearing, and the locket yawed open, then split one half, skittering into shadow. She didn't move for a breath. Then she crouched, palm on the cold floor, feeling dust and grit and the lost piece. Her fingers closed around it. It was warm. It shouldn't have been. "You okay?" Rowan asked, already through, his palm hovering without touching. "It's fine," she lied, tucking both halves into her pocket. "Let's go." Department 19 carried the same smell as yesterday: wax, recycled air, old paper. The bench was full again. A woman in the back row knitted with plastic needles that clicked like quiet bones. The lab tech went first. He wore a tan suit and the righteous calm of a man who believed in burners and balances. He deadpanned his way through accelerants gasoline with a methyl tert-butyl ether signature, traces of lamp oil, oxidizer residue in the wheel well. Lena took him through photos, close-ups of bubbled paint, heat shadows, the rivered pattern of a pour along the asphalt like a black lace. "Origin?" she asked. "Rear passenger seat," he said. "Ignition likely introduced by a long match or a grill lighter. No timer. Hands on. Any prints?" "Partial. On the jug handle." He nodded to the screen as it filled with the ghostly crescent of a fingerprint, indexed to a security contractor, Kip Kincaid, employed off books by Hartwell Holdings. Jansen objected to the last clause. Sustained. The judge's pen made a small circle on her legal pad. A moon with no sky. Salazar was next. Suit jacket open, tie dark with coffee. He testified to the footprint smear, the surveillance gap, the purchase of 2 grill lighters on a debit card registered to a shell company that paid Kincaid for logistics. No theatrics, just a file open, pages turned. The fact of it like a weight on a chest. "Do you see Mr. Kincaid in the courtroom?" Lena asked. Salazar pivoted. A man 2 rows behind Patricia lifted his chin as if his name were a dare. He had beekeeper's hands scarved. Square. Careful. Step forward, the judge said. Kip stood, but not forward. Rowan's shoulder tensed beside Nova's. Salazar moved faster than Kip moved. He was already there, hand to the man's forearm, other hand producing cuffs from inside his suit coat. Like a card from a sober magician, the gallery blew a breath all at once. Kip didn't fight. He tilted his head at Patricia the way a tradesman might nod at a client who refused to pay for permits. She didn't nod back. She stared at her own reflection in the council table, lips pressed to a color that had no name. They took Kip out under the judge's steady stare. "Let's keep moving," she said. Moira sat in the front row. She had on the same plain dress, different earrings, a small shift that felt like resolve. Lena recalled her and laid a single sheet on the rail, an email printout, header intact. A forward from a Gregory alias that thought it was clever. The subject line times optics. The body times smoke the hive. No stings. Attached an invoice from Kincaid's LLC for pest abatement. Jansen objected, until objection became a prayer. The judge allowed it for purpose of intent. Her pen tapped twice. It sounded like knuckles on a door that no one would answer. Jansen changed tactics. "Your Honor, we call Ms. Hartwell." Lena smiled, with every tooth she owned. Rowan leaned in and whispered, "Hubris." "Shh," Nova said. Though it tasted right, Patricia took the stand like a runway. She smoothed her skirt, set her jaw, and swore to tell a truth she had never met. Jansen's questions were softballs. She could lay into her philanthropy, her commitment to standards, the stress of being targeted. Every answer was wrapped in silk and tied with a bow she imagined the court might keep. "Did you instruct anyone to destroy a vehicle owned by Ms. Reed?" he asked. Finally, "No," she said. "I would never burn books. I buy them. I endow libraries. Ask anyone." Lena rose slow. Her first question was a glass of water, poured without spilling. "Ms. Hartwell, these are your messages to Ms. Nash." Patricia's eyes flicked to Moira, taken out of context. "Play Exhibit K," Lena said. On the small speaker, Patricia's voice filled the room with the cool of a spa. Asterisk. "I can't have that bus parked like a pity parade." Then a laugh, elegant and wrong. Asterisk. "Smoke them out. Then let them cry arson to their little followers." Jansen stood. "Your Honor." "Overruled," the judge said, not looking at him. Patricia recalibrated into indignation. "People are jealous," she said, chin tipping up. "I've become a face for causes they don't understand. There will always be noise." Lena's next question was nothing and everything. "Did you contact Ms. Reed after the protective order?" Patricia's silence was a triple beat. "No," she said finally. Lena lifted a printed image with gloved fingers. A screenshot of a DM from a burner account that wasn't as anonymous as it believed. Metadata still wearing its house keys. IP resolved to a wing of a Bel Air mansion where the Wi-Fi name was Hartwell 2. The message, short as a blade times ash, doesn't prove fire. It proves weakness. "Do you deny sending this?" Patricia glanced at Jansen. He shook his head by a hair. "I have assistants," she said. "They protect me from unpleasantness." "Read line 2, Lena said. Patricia read it. When she reached the word times weakness asterisk, her mouth softened into a shape that made Nova think of a smile smothered under a pillow. "Bail is revoked," the judge said, like calling a time of death. "Remanded pending further proceedings." "We are done playing." The bailiff moved. A cuff clicked. It was a small sound, and it took up the whole room. Patricia's composure shredded. "You think this is justice?" She snapped at Nova as they turned her. "You think reading to children makes you holy? You're not in my world." Nova sat very still. Her hands were flat on her knees. She felt the broken locket pieces shift in her pocket like coins that wouldn't spend. The room exhaled without a sound. The knitting woman set her needles in her lap and stared at the doorway where the defendant had just vanished. On the steps, microphones advanced like flowers with metal stems. Lena gave a one-sentence statement and walked. Rowan took one question and made it a no comment with good posture. Gregory called Moira. She let it ring until it died. Then she handed Nova the phone and said, "Want a souvenir?" Nova shook her head. "Let it go." A man peeled off from the press pack and approached Robert. "You really think you did the right thing?" he asked, voice oily. Robert looked up at the gray sky that was trying to burn to blue. "I sleep," he said. "That's the whole trick." In the sedan, Nova opened her hand and laid the two halves of the locket on her palm. The hinge pin was gone. Inside, a thumbprint of ash stained the concave heart where a photo had never been. "Want a jeweler?" Rowan asked. She closed her fingers. "No, I think it did what it needed to do." He understood. Or didn't. But he didn't ask again. They drove in a silence that wasn't empty. The city slid by with its bruises, and its neon and its mourning people who walk, like they believe the light will hold. At the center, volunteers had taped brown paper over the alley wall and sketched the first lines of a bus that floated above the bricks like a dream. Kids passed paint in cups that left their fingers ring. Damon climbed a stepladder and chalked a horizon. Moira leaned against the doorway, watching a boy choose blue. "He'll paint the sky the color he wishes it was," she said. Nova stood beside her. "That's how you start." A donor had left a check folded inside an envelope. The number Dizzy. The memo line a condition times no public statements. Lena's voice lived on Nova's shoulder. "Your choice. Money isn't guilt, but sometimes it behaves like it." Nova slid the check back into the envelope and pressed it between the pages of a battered paperback on the free cart. "Someone else will decide what that book is worth," she said. Rowan rolled in a shelf he'd built in the garage. 2x4s. Planed, smooth, casters that didn't squeak. "Where do you want it?" he asked. Nova placed her palm on the top where the grain made a river. "Here," she said, "by the window, where the light hits." She knelt, pulled a small mason jar of screws from the tote, and found the locket halves in her pocket. The metal had cooled. She set one half under the front left wheel and put her weight into the shelf until the caster chalked it like a doorstop. "Sure," Rowan said, watching her. "Not a keepsake," she said. "A cornerstone." People painted and laughed and stepped back to squint. A breeze moved through the room and lifted a corner of butcher paper still taped to the far wall. "Words we keep." Under it, in a kid's handwriting, was a new line. "Time's fire makes room for light." She sat on the floor a moment, back against the new shelf. The building hummed. Outside, a truck downshifted, and the sound rolled past like weather. Her phone, off all morning, shimmered with light when she turned it. Messages stacked like bricks, some cruel, some soft, most just noise. At the bottom, a voice memo from an unknown number. She pressed play and held it to her ear. A breath, then a voice she didn't recognize, low and halting, like someone talking from a closet. "I saw what he did," the voice said. "Kincaid. I drove him. I'll talk if someone makes it safe." Nova looked at Rowan. He was wiping blue from a boy's cheek with the corner of his t-shirt, careful not to smudge the kid's pride. She looked at Moira, who had finally answered Gregory's call and was saying nothing, letting him hear that she could. Nova saved the message and forwarded it to Salazar. Then she set the phone face down and watched a girl fill in a wheel well with steady strokes. Quite held. It wasn't peace. It was making room. By sundown, the bus on the wall had windows. Someone had painted curtains. Someone had painted a hinge on the door. Small and bright, like a lit match. The lights clicked on with a hum that had become familiar. Nova stood, brushed chalk from her palm, and turned to see the alley mouth framed with gold. The last light of the day caught in the dust, like a held breath. "Read?" one of the kids asked, already reaching for a book. Nova nodded. She opened to a first line, and let the words do what they were always supposed to do: enter a room and change the air. When the line ended, nobody spoke. A moth tapped at the window, then settled, then lifted again. They listened to that small sound, all of them, as if a hinge were deciding whether to open. When we strip this story to its beam and joists, the lesson is plain and steady. Dignity is not a favor, it's a fact, and we defend it in small, daily acts. Real courage isn't loud. It's the quiet insistence on telling the truth when the room prefers a prettier lie. We've seen how silence can calcify into harm, how status can masquerade as virtue, and how easy it is to doubt our own worth when someone speaks with money instead of meaning. But true gold fears no fire. Character is tempered by heat, by the awkward conversation, the formal complaint, the witness statement, the simple refusal to step aside. For those who've carried the weight of bias or belittlement for years, take heart. You are not required to audition for your own life. Recognize the patterns that shrink you, name them, and walk toward the light that doesn't ask you to disappear to be loved. For those with power of title, of network, of age, remember that fairness isn't a sentiment. It's a practice measured in receipts, policies, and who gets a seat at the table. The long road shows the strong horse, and integrity keeps pace even when no one claps. In the end, you reap what you sow. Contempt breeds ash. Respect builds rooms where people can breathe. If this resonated, I'd love to hear what stayed with you. Share a moment when you faced down unfairness, or when someone stood up for you and it changed the weather. Drop your reflections in the comments. Tap like if the story moved you, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of hard questions and hard-won grace. Until then, may your nights be quiet, your mornings kind, and may you find a steady peace after the noise, like light settling in a room that's finally yours.